Before this story begins, I want you to imagine something. Imagine standing on a mountain ridge, the wind screaming in your ears, a single decision resting on your finger. One shot could save innocent lives. One mistake could haunt you forever. Tonight's story is not just about war, it's about choice, about distance, not measured in miles but in consequences. This is the story of a young sniper forced to decide who lives, and what part of herself she will lose in the process. Stay with me until the end, because what happens after the final shot may change the way you see courage, duty, and sacrifice forever. The mountain wind screamed like a living thing, clawing at the rocks and tearing through the narrow pass. It carried dust, grit, and the distant echo of gunfire, sounds that blended into a single endless howl. Lieutenant Evelyn Cross lay flat against the cold stone, her cheek pressed into the rifle stock, her breath slow and measured despite the chaos around her. In her earpiece, the command channel crackled. "Do not fire. Repeat, do not engage. That structure is classified as civilian." The voice was calm, detached, safe. It belonged to a man sitting in a reinforced operations room thousands of miles away, staring at satellite feeds and legal disclaimers. Evelyn did not respond. Through her scope, the world shrank into geometry and probability. Wind drift, elevation, distance. A human silhouette moved between ruined walls below, too close to the smaller shapes clinging to him. Children. Their heat signatures bled together in the thermal view, indistinguishable from one another. If she fired and missed, she would kill the wrong person. If she didn't fire, everyone she came with would die. Behind her, Captain Jonah Hale struggled to breathe. Blood soaked through the front of his plate carrier, dark and glossy under the moonlight. He reached out and grabbed the back of her boot, fingers slick, grip weak but desperate. "Eve," he whispered, "you're the only one who can see it." Her jaw tightened. "I see it," she said quietly. Then she did something no one expected. She pulled her finger away from the trigger. 72 hours earlier, the airstrip at Falcon Ridge Base shimmered under brutal heat. The smell of jet fuel and scorched earth clung to everything. Evelyn lay prone on the firing line, the massive long-range rifle dwarfing her slim frame. Around her, operators watched with poorly hidden skepticism. "She's too young," someone muttered. "She doesn't look like much. She's never seen real contact." Evelyn ignored them all. Her world lived inside the scope. She fired. The shot echoed across the range. 3 seconds passed. Clang. Dead center. A ripple of surprise moved through the group. She fired again. Clang. Again. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. Captain Hale stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Evelyn adjusted her bipod, already logging wind data. "Back home," she said. "Hunting groundhogs across valleys, miss once, and they disappear forever." Hale studied her for a long moment. "Pack up," he finally said. "You're coming with us." The insertion was fast and violent. Rotor wash battered the mountainside as the helicopter dropped low, skimming terrain to avoid detection. Inside, the team moved like a single organism, checking weapons, locking gear, rehearsing angles. Evelyn sat near the rear, her rifle awkward in the confined space. "You stay behind me," Hale ordered over comms. "You don't freelance. You don't hunt." "Yes, sir." But as the aircraft descended, something caught her eye. A patch of ground near the landing zone, slightly darker, disturbed. "Hold," she said sharply. "What?" the pilot snapped. "Shift left, now." Hale turned toward her. "Lieutenant." "Shift the LZ," she shouted. The pilot reacted instinctively. The helicopter lurched, sliding sideways just as they touched down. Seconds later, a hidden explosive detonated where they would have landed. Silence followed. No one said a word. Hale finally exhaled. "You just saved all our lives." Evelyn didn't smile. She scanned the ridgeline instead. "We're not alone," she said. The ambush came at dawn. Gunfire erupted from above, pouring down from prepared positions carved into the rock. The team scrambled for cover, pinned inside a shallow compound with nowhere to run. A rocket slammed into the outer wall. Hale went down. Evelyn found herself separated, alone in a collapsed animal pen, her rifle resting on broken wood and dirt. Above her, enemy gunners fired freely, convinced they had the advantage. They didn't know she was there. She engaged. One shot, then another. Targets dropped, confusion rippling through the attackers. But the moment didn't last. Fire shifted toward her position. The pen disintegrated under incoming rounds. She had 2 choices: stay and die, or move and become visible. Evelyn chose movement. Now, back in the present, she lay on the ridge with Hale bleeding behind her and children trapped below. "Lieutenant Cross," command said again, firmer this time. "Stand down." Evelyn closed one eye. The wind shifted. For half a second, the valley went still. She exhaled. "I'm sorry," she whispered, to no one in particular. Then she pulled the trigger. The shot changed everything. For a fraction of a second after Evelyn Cross pulled the trigger, the world held its breath. The rifle's recoil slammed into her shoulder, driving her back into the dirt and stone. The sound followed a heartbeat later, a thunderclap that bounced violently through the valley, echoing off the mountains like an accusation. Below, the figure using the children as cover collapsed. Chaos erupted. Screams tore through the narrow streets as civilians scattered in every direction. The children fell to the ground, unharmed but stunned, their heat signatures trembling in the thermal view. Armed men shouted orders in a language Evelyn didn't understand, weapons swinging wildly as they searched for the source of the shot. They didn't know where she was, but they would. "Contact broken," Evelyn said into the radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Threat neutralized, civilians dispersing." No one responded. She glanced over her shoulder. Captain Jonah Hale lay motionless now, his breathing shallow, his chest rising unevenly beneath blood-soaked armor. The medic was crouched beside him, hands slick with red, pressing hard against the wound. "Talk to me," the medic hissed. "Stay with me, sir." Hale's eyes fluttered, unfocused. Evelyn forced herself back into position. She didn't have the luxury of fear. Fear slowed the mind, and hesitation killed. Above her, on the far ridgeline, something shifted. She caught it just in time, a faint distortion in the air, barely visible through the scope. Not a body, not heat. Glass. Someone had just adjusted a lens. Her stomach tightened. "Sniper," she whispered. "High ground, North Ridge." This wasn't a random ambush anymore. It was a trap, a layered, patient kill zone designed to bleed them out slowly. And she was standing in the middle of it. The first return shot came without warning. The round punched through the wall beside her, exploding stone into dust and razor-sharp fragments. Evelyn rolled instinctively, dirt filling her mouth as another round cracked overhead. The enemy sniper wasn't firing blindly. He was ranging her. "Move, move," someone shouted over the radio. Evelyn didn't move. She counted. 1, 2, 3. The second shot hit where she had been. Good, she thought. He's disciplined, slow, confident. That made him dangerous. She crawled backward, inch by inch, keeping her profile low as she slid into the shadow of a jagged rock formation. From here, the angle changed. The ridgeline was still visible, but the sight picture narrowed. She breathed in slowly, forcing her heart rate down. Think in numbers. Distance, long. Angle, steep. Wind, erratic, curling unpredictably through the canyon. The enemy sniper fired again, this time into the compound, punching through cover with brutal precision. A scream followed. Someone else was hit. "Evelyn!" The medic's voice crackled, tight with panic. "We're losing him. We need air support now." She swallowed. "Negative," command finally replied, the signal breaking in and out. "No assets available. You're on your own for at least 15 minutes. 15 minutes might as well have been forever. Evelyn shifted her focus back to the ridge. The sniper up there believed he controlled the battlefield. He had elevation, distance, patience. From his perspective, she was just another target, another problem that would eventually expose itself. He didn't know her. She watched the ridge not for movement, but for absence. Snipers didn't glow on thermal like riflemen. They hid in voids, cold spaces carved into rock, places where nothing should exist. There. A narrow fissure, too straight, too deliberate. She smiled grimly. "Found you." "Contact located," she murmured. "I'm engaging." "No," the medic snapped. "You move, you die." "If I don't," Evelyn replied, calm as ice, "we all do." She began to climb. The ascent was brutal. The rock tore at her gloves. The rifle dragged at her spine like an anchor. Every movement sent pain lancing through her shoulders and legs, but she ignored it. Pain was just information. It could be acknowledged later, if later existed. Halfway up, loose shale gave way beneath her boot. She slipped. For a terrifying second, gravity claimed her. Then she caught herself, fingers screaming as they clawed into stone. Pebbles rattled down the cliff face, echoing far too loudly in the stillness. Above, gunfire shifted. They heard that. Bullets stitched the rock around her, spraying chips and dust. She flattened herself against the cliff, becoming nothing more than another shadow. "Don't move." Minutes stretched into eternity. The firing slowed, then stopped. They assumed she'd fallen. They were wrong. When the light changed, when the sun dipped low enough to cast long shadows across the rock, Evelyn moved again. Slowly, methodically, inch by inch. At last she reached the shelf. From here, everything looked different. The geometry changed. She lay prone, chest pressed to cold stone, and peered through the scope. The fissure was no longer a void. Inside, she saw him. The enemy sniper crouched behind his rifle, unaware, relaxed. Beside him, deeper in the rock, sat another figure, a spotter, scanning the valley below with binoculars. Ammo crates glowed faintly in the thermal view. This wasn't just a shooter. It was a nest. Her pulse slowed. "One shot," she whispered to herself. "That's all you get." The wind screamed across the ridge, violent and unpredictable. Gusts tore at her jacket, threatened to push the bullet off course. She waited, eyes locked on the mirage dancing off the rock face. Wait. Then nothing. The wind died. Now, she fired. The shot felt different this time. Heavier, final. The bullet tore across the canyon, invisible, unstoppable. Through the scope, Evelyn watched the sniper jerk violently backward, his heat signature collapsing as if someone had switched him off. A heartbeat later, the sound arrived. The spotter froze. Then chaos. Evelyn didn't stay to admire the work. She cycled the bolt and fired again, shattering the ammunition stacked behind them. The explosion inside the fissure lit the thermal view like a small sun. "Target down," she said. "Nest destroyed." Relief flooded the radio, but it didn't last. "Evelyn!" someone shouted. "Incoming!" She heard it before she felt it, the deep, hollow thump of indirect fire. Mortars. The first round landed below her ledge. The second landed closer. They were walking it in. She scrambled backward just as the third round detonated near her position, the blast throwing her hard against the rock. Her vision went white. Sound vanished, replaced by a high-pitched ringing that seemed to split her skull open. She tasted blood. Her scope was cracked. Blind. "Stay conscious," she whispered to herself. "Stay awake." She dragged herself into a narrow chute, rocks tearing at her uniform as she slid downward, away from the explosions. The rifle felt impossibly heavy now, every movement a battle against gravity and pain. She stopped only when the mortars ceased. Silence returned, thick and unnatural. Evelyn lay there, gasping, staring at the fractured lens of her scope. Still functional. Barely. She looked down toward the valley. The team was moving again, dragging Hale toward extraction. They were alive. That was enough. She pushed herself up. The night wasn't over. And neither was she. The mountain went quiet in the way only battlefields do when they are deciding what comes next. Evelyn Cross lay pressed into the rock, her chest heaving, her breath ragged and metallic in her mouth. Every nerve screamed. Her ears rang so violently she couldn't tell whether the silence was real or simply something her brain had fabricated to protect itself. She flexed her fingers. They responded. Good. She dragged the rifle closer, feeling the rough scrape of stone against cracked skin. The scope's fracture cut the world in half. One side warped, the other painfully sharp. It would have to do. Below her, the valley was alive again. Flashlights flickered. Voices echoed. Shapes moved with purpose and fear. The enemy hadn't broken. They had adapted. Small groups fanned out from the village, climbing the lower slopes with methodical patience. Hunter teams. They were coming for her. Evelyn didn't curse. She didn't panic. She thought. Distance was no longer her ally. Elevation had bought her time, but time was running out. The extraction birds were inbound, but not fast enough. If the hunters reached her before the team lifted off, she would be surrounded with nowhere to run. She keyed the radio. "Jonah," she said softly. A pause, static. Then weak but unmistakable, "I'm here." Relief hit her harder than any explosion. "They're moving uphill," she said. "They know where I am." Another pause. She imagined him lying in the dirt, blood-soaked bandages pressed to his neck, eyes staring at the stars. "Can you get away?" he asked. Evelyn looked at the cliff face above her, then at the steep chute below, then at the shapes climbing steadily, rifles ready, patience etched into every step. "No," she said. Jonah exhaled slowly. "Then don't run." She smiled despite herself. "Never planned to." Cold crept into her bones as the night deepened. The temperature dropped fast, bleeding warmth from the rock and from her body. She scooped damp mud from a shallow crevice and smeared it across her face, her neck, her hands, masking her heat, erasing herself from thermal sight. The smell was sharp and bitter. Good. She pulled a thin emergency blanket from her kit and draped it loosely over her back, then covered it with dirt and brush. Inside the makeshift cocoon, she shook uncontrollably, not from fear but from the cold. She forced her breathing slow. In, hold, out. Footsteps crunched on gravel somewhere nearby. 10 meters, maybe less. Evelyn slid her hand to the knife at her belt. The rifle was too long, too loud. If this became close, it would be silent or it would be over. A shadow crossed the mouth of her hide. She didn't move. A man stepped into view, his rifle raised, thermal optic glowing faintly red. He scanned left to right, slow and careful. He was young, younger than her. His breath puffed white in the cold air. He paused. For a moment, his gaze rested directly on her position. Evelyn's heart slammed so hard she was certain he could hear it. But the mud held, the cold held. She was just another rock. The man turned away, murmuring into his radio. When his back was to her, she moved. It wasn't a decision, it was instinct, fat, brutal, final. She surged from the earth, one hand clamping his weapon down, the other driving the knife up beneath his jaw. The sound he made was small and surprised. He collapsed into her arms, heavy and warm, then went still. Evelyn eased him to the ground. Her hands shook. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she kept moving. The hunter teams were closer now, too close. She could hear them coordinating, see their lights bouncing against the rocks. She needed distance. She needed chaos. She found it in a narrow saddle overlooking the road. Below, a vehicle idled beside a cluster of rocks. Communications gear hastily set up, antenna extended, cables snaking into the darkness. The enemy hadn't just been hunting her. They had been trying to blind her team. Evelyn settled prone, bracing the rifle against a stone. The cracked scope flared and distorted the image, but the target was close enough. She fired. The antenna shattered. Sparks leapt into the night. The vehicle died with a cough of smoke. Shouts erupted below. The mountain answered with gunfire. Evelyn didn't stay. She slid down the opposite side of the ridge, boots scraping, body aching, lungs burning. Every step felt like running through water. She fell once, hard, knocking the wind from her chest. She forced herself up again. Extraction lights bloomed in the valley. The helicopters were finally here. But the enemy knew it too. Gunfire intensified. Tracers arced upward, desperate and furious. Evelyn dropped to one knee and fired methodically, each shot deliberate, each target chosen to break momentum rather than chase kills. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was buying time. "Evelyn," Jonah's voice crackled, stronger now. "We're moving. Where are you?" "On your flank," she replied. "Don't stop." She covered them until the last man boarded, until the rotors screamed loud enough to drown out everything else. Only then did she turn away, retreating into the shadows as the helicopters lifted, carrying the wounded and the living away from the valley. The night swallowed her. They found her at dawn. A search team spotted movement near the ridge, a lone figure sitting against a rock, rifle across her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. Evelyn didn't resist when they reached her. She didn't speak. She simply stood when asked, legs trembling, body exhausted beyond words. Back at base, medics wrapped her in blankets and checked her for injuries she hadn't noticed. Someone handed her a cup of water. Another placed a hand on her shoulder. Jonah found her hours later. His voice was rough, his movements stiff, but he was alive. "They're calling it a success," he said quietly. "Intel recovered. Civilians survived. Team extracted." Evelyn stared at her hands. "At what cost?" she asked. Jonah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The inquiry was brief, official, sanitized. Rules of engagement were reviewed. Decisions were weighed. Words like necessity and proportional response were used liberally. In the end, the conclusion was simple. Her actions were justified. Commendations were recommended. Evelyn listened without reacting. That night, alone in her quarters, she disassembled her rifle piece by piece, cleaned it, reassembled it. Then she stopped, hands resting on the cold metal. She thought of the children, of the man in the fissure, of the young scout whose name she would never know. She thought of the moment when the wind died and the shot became inevitable. And she understood something she hadn't before. The distance that mattered wasn't measured in meters. It was measured in consequences. Weeks later, Evelyn stood at the edge of the range as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of fire and ash. Recruits trained in the distance, their laughter carrying faintly on the wind. Jonah approached, slower now, but steady. "They want you back in the field," he said. "Your call." Evelyn watched a young soldier adjust a scope, uncertainty written plainly across his face. She shook her head. "Not yet." He nodded, understanding more than he said. As he walked away, Evelyn lay prone once more, pressing her cheek to the stock of her rifle. She didn't aim at a target. She didn't fire. She simply breathed. Somewhere far away, mountains waited. And one day, she knew she would return. But never again without remembering what remained after the shot. Some stories end with victory. Others end with silence. This one ends with a question. What remains after the shot? If this story moved you, if it made you pause, think, or feel something deeper than just entertainment, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we tell stories that go beyond headlines. Stories about human choices under impossible pressure. Stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next story. And if this video resonated with you, please like it. It truly helps the channel grow and reach more listeners like you. Thank you for spending your time here. Until the next story, stay thoughtful, stay curious, and stay human.